And that was the first time that I actually heard of the terminology environmental justice. That was the first time that I was able to start making these connections of why is it that a lot of my family members have asthma, where we're experiencing a drought like we've never seen before.
And I think that's one of the main elements that we need to work. It's empowering our community.
If we don't do the work in our own circles, in our own families, in our own neighborhoods, at our own schools, at our own workplaces, on the public bus, at the dinner table, we need to have those conversations first.
This conversation is incredibly important and timely as our nation continues to grapple with the pervasive systemic racism, including in our environmental, energy, and healthcare systems.
Everyone, and welcome to the Green Table Talks. My name is Wawa Guerrero, and I am one of the co-hosts of this monthly intergenerational conversation where we talk all things environmental justice. I'd like to pass it along to my fellow co-host.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karina Martinez. I'm the Chief Communications Officer with Corazon Latino, and I'm so excited to be back with you all today.
So today we have a very, very special guest. Their name is Jaylin. Jaylin, would you like to introduce yourself here today?
Hi, I'm Jaylin Ward. I use they, she pronouns, and I'm the Director of Diaspora Strategy and Media at Generation Green.
Amazing, Jaylin. We're so happy to have you here. Also, I just remembered I did not introduce what we're discussing today. So as many of y'all know, this month is Women's History Month. And in light of our whole series in regards to talking about environmental justice, we really wanted to add the element of discussing why the intersection between women's rights and women's liberation has everything to do with environmental justice and really explore that in an intergenerational conversation. So I'll start off the conversation with this question that'll be going obviously to you, Jaylin. So in 1980, President Jimmy Carter issued the first presidential proclamation declaring the week of March 8th as National Women's History Month. The US Congress followed suit the next year, passing a resolution establishing a national celebration. It's now been 42 years since, and women are still bearing the brunt of discrimination, especially in regards to the climate crisis, which actually negatively impacts Black women, girls, and Black non-binary folks more than any other demographic in the United States. So with that in mind, why is it important to amplify and center the narrative of Black, Latinx, and Indigenous women when we talk about Women's History Month?
Awesome. Okay, that's a great question. I think it's important to talk about womanhood during Women's History Month when it comes to climate and environmental justice, because I think it gives us a confrontation with dealing with colonialism and internalized colonialism. Because the idea that we are all women is something that we've been ascribed as an event of colonization. So it's important for people who've been ascribed womanhood and trans femmes to be a part of safe spaces where we can express our grief with this positionality, because it's been personally more liberating to intentionally decenter womanhood as it is a Western construct or as it appears in Western society, so that I can more acutely focus on how I'm showing up in community. I'm more than someone who is anatomically appearing as a female or a woman. I'm a community healer. I'm a pillar to my family. I'm a water protector, at least I am to be my destiny and Ifa. So by design and by choice, I am so much more than my anatomy. And it's important that we realize our strength and power during this month when it comes to organizing and movement building, because we are so much more than the positions we've been ascribed through colonization and oppressive patriarchy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, just to add to your point, I mean, we have to deal with that portion of it, and also not even getting the recognition for a lot of this work as well, and the strength of womanhood. And there have been so many women over time who fought against even like big oil corporations, and I can name a few, but I'm going to get to the point where I'm going to ask you to also name some of your favorites. But you know, we've heard of Rigoberta Menchú, who's a Guatemalan human rights activist, feminist, and Nobel Prize laureate, who stood up to Chevron to protect Ecuadorian rainforests from toxic pollutants. So, who are some other Black, Latinx, and/or Indigenous women, past or present, who've led the fight and the drive, such as Rigoberta Menchú, who inspire your work, and why?
Awesome. So, as an Orisha devotee, I think the first original woman that I can think of is Oshun, my head Orisha, who first and foremost inspires me as the creator of water, the spirit of water, something that we have to strive so hard to protect due to exploitative capitalistic companies. And their wisdom really guides how I do my work as a diasporic person and someone who does diaspora strategy for Generation Green, et cetera, et cetera. So shout out to my yeye first and foremost, and of course my mother, who has taught me to, you know, just use my voice for whatever I believe is right, and learning to be a student as well throughout all my life. My mom went and got her master's when I was about 15 years old, so I was in school with her too. So always being a student of life and receiving education as it comes. So when it comes to those who have been ascribed womanhood, I'm very careful about who I call a woman, because we don't know how our ancestors would have identified if they had the words of people like Oyeronke or Oyewumi as we do now. But I'd say farmers have been a really great inspiration to my work, because the land is where the movement is at, on this land. So Mama Tingo of Dominican Republic, who fought against Dominican presidents for taking land back from Afro-Indigenous people. I'd say Florence Tate, a farmer girl who experienced depression as they were organizing in SNCC, and you know, as the I think it was the press secretary for the Jesse Jackson campaign. And of course, Fannie Lou Hamer, just great reproductive health work, rights, women's rights to vote, but also realizing that the land is rooted, the revolution is rooted in the land because of her sharecropping background. We don't usually see her as an environmentalist, but the two really go together. And I'd say people who've been ascribed womanhood in the Mau Mau revolution against the British government in Kenya, that, like, to see that 8,000 femmes were detained, and that women and femmes were really guiding that movement, have inspired me. And I heard a story of a particular woman who started growing dreadlocks and moved to the mountains and refuses to come down until colonization has been removed from Kenya. So stories like that really inspire my work. Just resistance against colonizers like the United States and other Western nations really inspire and amplify my voice to fight for autonomy and land protection.
Yes, thank you so much for recognizing the Mau Mau resistance movement. My ancestors, including my grandfather, was in that fight. And a lot of people don't talk about our contributions and the way that that really showed the Black resistance in the face of colonization. So I just want to thank you for providing that insight as well. So we're talking a lot about the importance of really recognizing, appreciating, and in doing so, appreciating what we're learning from our ancestors. And one of my favorite environmental justice ancestors who I constantly look towards for inspiration is Hazel Johnson, who is also commonly known and referred to as the mother of the environmental justice movement, as she fought with herself and with her community in Chicago against the inhumane living conditions in Chicago's public housing. And what's unfortunate is that even today, we're still battling not just affordable housing in the US, but livable housing. According to the CDC, approximately 29 million housing units have lead-based paint hazards, including house dust. And about 2.6 million of those homes are home to children. So Jaylin, given all of the insight that you're providing here today and what you've been taught by your ancestors and your experience as an organizer, as a water protector, and as this phenomenal environmental justice advocate and activist, what advice do you give for folks that are seeking strategies to get involved in environmental justice, organizing in general, which obviously also includes the fight for fair, equitable, and affordable housing?
Well, I think that housing is not my expertise. I'm no authority on this issue, but I did grow up in a huge housing community called Co-op City in the North Bronx. And, occasionally water be shut off, or sometimes there'd be like asbestos cleanings and, cleaning old apartments for old lead, because this was constructed, like, I think in the 70s, my community was constructed. So I think a big thing people can do is imagine in a liberated world how they would like to live and what healthier housing looks like. And to me, I think that is collective ownership. I see a lot of Black people buying back the block. And I think that just perpetuates capitalism. We don't need to be the sole owners of our community. We can incentivize each other to come together communally with our neighbors. And that requires collective economics like susus and, moving as a unified force with the people around you. Notifying your neighbors of like how much your rent is. I think that's definitely a great strategy because, the leasing office will get anybody. The numbers are based off of an algorithm that's based on mood. The market is based on mood and how white men feel about how money should be spent right now in this climate, So I think the best thing we can do is use the power of our imagination to see what we want. And then teaming up with your own neighbors to be like, okay, like I'm tired of the water getting shut off every weekend. Like, what is this about? Is this for our safety? Or is it because we are Latinx and Black? Like, what is going on here? Really raising the issues together. I think unity is the most powerful tool, and definitely collective economics as, people living together, basically.
Yes, we have to strategize. We have to unite. We have to team up together. I love all of that. And thank you for just those solid words there. It made me definitely think of things in different ways already. So we do have some strong roots of environmental justice leadership, both past and present, from organizations such as We Act for Environmental Justice in Harlem, New York, that's co-founded by Peggy Shepard. We also have the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice in Louisiana, founded by Dr. Beverly Wright, and other organizations like Generation Green, Poder Latinx, BlackGirlEnvironmentalist, and of course, Black Millennials for Flint. Jaylin, why is it critical for Black and Latinx and Indigenous women to take seats of power in the environmental justice arena?
So I am an environmental liberationist, which is a bit different than environmental justice. I think we are sister movements, but for those of us who have sisters, you don't want to be identified with your sister, you're your own person. So I think What is different is that we believe we need to go straight for the head and demand liberation in this battle. The justice system is not offering us justice, as we can see time and time again. Justice in this country is punitive, and we need transformation. And in order to have transformative justice and restorative justice, we first need to make a big deal about it. We first need to have that revolution. We first need to, have that big push where we all get together and say no more, and we're doing that. I think 2020 really showed us how this pandemic is really changing our minds. We're having time to sit down and read and really revolutionize our minds and decolonize our minds. And we're in the streets. And I think when it gets warm again, we will be in the streets again. The streets are calling, So I think as so-called women, we don't need a call to take seats. We've always taken seats of power. We need the opportunity to create our own space and create ever expanding circles and not lines. We need to call to gather safe spaces for all femmes. Organizing can be so unsafe at times, especially due to internalized colonialism, and it's easy to lose sight of the problem. But we need community accountability. We need workspaces where the urgency to change the system doesn't take a toll on your health. And that's what Generation Green has been for me and for the 5 of us. And we hope to expand our team of more people who want to fight for the environment, but need a space that also feels healing, and the urgency of paternalism and patriarchy isn't just consuming us, This is a call to slow down, really. And, think about what you want your future to look like and how that doesn't only need to rest on your shoulders. I think so-called women need that space so much now than ever more, especially with how much social media makes everything feel so rapid. And if you're not doing rapid response, you don't feel like you're making an impact. I think it's important for us to visualize, excuse me, it's important for us to visualize how giant this problem is and how we can go at it bit by bit, day by day, generation by generation, and rely on each other and create communities of trust. So we already have the power. It's just time for us to create collective power and do some more community building. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for giving us a little bit more information about what's going on in the streets. That perspective is so valuable. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on at the government level as well. Recently, the Biden-Harris administration decided to prioritize green jobs, and on the surface, that sounds amazing. However, according to the U.S. Department of Labor, the pandemic stalled gains made towards closing the pay gap, and layoffs and a lack of childcare have forced many women out of the workforce entirely. So in February of last year, 2021, women's labor force participation was about 55.8%, the same rate as in April of 1987. And women of color and those working in low-wage occupations have been the most impacted. So it's not entirely looking that great for us. Jaylin, if you were speaking to President Biden and Vice President Harris tonight, oh boy, what advice would you give to use this need for green jobs as a strategy to close the gender pay gap?
That's a great question. What would I like to say to President Biden and, go HU, Vice President Harris? I don't think I ever expect America to have the same gender values as I do. I think the creation of this country is quite an antithesis to what we're all demanding, right? But I do expect this country to make space for individuals to mark their path autonomously. I think that is our First Amendment right. And I think you violate that by saying your worth 82 cents to a white man's dollar. I think you violate our constitutional rights and autonomy when you do that. So I think it's important that these green jobs are not only based on the elements of the environment, but also incorporate people of color's traditional ways of knowing, because the environment is so integrated into that. So green jobs don't look like just professions that are, building solar panels, or like, how to figure out how to get rid of nuclear waste and, more of the technical things. It also includes survival work. And in order to include that in green jobs, you have to first respect people's humanity. And that requires major decolonization. So I would tell Vice President Harris specifically to support non-tenured faculty at Howard University, their alma mater, who are fighting for basic employee rights. I think my decolonization started at my HBCU. And I think this will help future generations correct the path forward. So if they want explicit advice, maybe they need to contract some of these green groups who are doing the survival work and the social work, and stop spying on our organizations. I think that's what I'd say.
The viewers can't see the amazing Latricia always firing it up in the chat, but it's the energy that I love every time. Jaylin, thank you so much. I can't follow up to that, but thank you. So we have been able to learn so much from you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be a part of this conversation. And as we begin to wrap up this conversation, I wanted to ask you one more question. It's an advice-based question. You can decline if you like, since I kind of already asked for advice before, but what advice would you give for the listeners here today that have likely even spent this time even questioning what their conception of womanhood is and how they can better celebrate Women's History Month, if that is a path towards really taking into account how multifaceted this is. So what advice do you give to folks that may want to learn more, may want to continue to expand their learning, and may want to continue to learn and hear from you?
Okay. Since I've been educating myself this month, I encourage everyone to do the same. I don't have the book on me right now, but it's called The Invention of Women by Oyeronke Oyemumi, a Yoruba scholar and professor. And I think that book has really broken down how body politics and biological determinism, and even the biology as a science, is all a part of the Western worldview. And Indigenous folks everywhere have more of a world sense. Not everything is just what you see, but what all your senses feel and how those things come together. And that has really influenced how I identify as a non-binary femme. So that book is doing a lot of the major moving when it comes to gender identity. And I suggest everybody get that, a notepad and a pen, your special pen, your special notepad to do this work, because your brain space is the first thing that you own, and you want to nourish that and make it clear. You want to feed your brain, feed your ori, and really spend this time thinking and imagining, because so much of this world creates urgency, so many problems for us to respond to, but you have time. You have mucho tiempo, okay? Like, there's not this much urgency. You need to slow down and think about your imagination, what you can become, who you are, who you have the power to be, and really sit there, really just sit, create time to sit and read that book. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jaylin. It's been such a pleasure. We would love to have you back one day. And I hope that you all look up that book. While you were talking, I found several links for it, and I think we can definitely put it in the description when this airs. But thank you so much for for taking the time to have this really empowering conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm so flattered that you guys felt I should be here.
Oh,